There comes a moment when the world feels heavy, when voices around seem louder than your own heartbeat, and when expectations tighten like invisible chains. In that moment, a woman learns that silence is not weakness, but a doorway into herself, a doorway where clarity waits, where strength rests quietly, like water that carves mountains without ever raising its voice. Silence is not weakness, it is inner strength that reshapes the world. Too often silence is misunderstood as absence, as passivity, as a lack of courage to speak up. Yet silence has always been the quiet fire that sustains resilience, the invisible force that strengthens the spirit when words would only scatter energy. In a world that glorifies noise, speed, and constant explanation, silence becomes an act of resistance, a declaration that not everything needs to be spoken, not everything requires defense, and not everything deserves response. It is in silence that a woman begins to collect the fragments of herself that the world has scattered, and it is in silence that she starts weaving them back together into something unshakable. Silence allows her to step away from the chaos that demands immediate reactions. It offers her the rare gift of perspective. While others are entangled in arguments and endless justifications, she is grounded in stillness, choosing not to waste her strength on battles that drain rather than build. In those quiet spaces, her inner voice grows louder than the voices outside, and her intuition takes the lead where confusion once reigned. That stillness becomes her compass, guiding her toward choices that align with her truth, not with the expectations imposed on her. When she refuses to react with noise, she begins to see how silence itself becomes a form of communication. Without uttering a word, she conveys dignity, boundaries, and power. The absence of response unsettles those who expect her compliance, because silence denies them the control they seek. It is not an escape, it is a strategy. It is strength disguised as calmness, patience wearing the cloak of serenity. Through silence, she reclaims her energy, and through silence, she transforms her presence into something that cannot be ignored. Silence has the power to reshape not just the individual, but the space around her. In silence, conversations shift, dynamics transform, and relationships are redefined. People begin to listen more closely when she finally chooses to speak, for her words carry the weight of restraint, the wisdom of reflection, and the strength of someone who does not squander her voice. This is why silence is not weakness, it is preparation. It is the sharpening of the sword before the battle, the gathering of storms before the rain, the pause that makes the next step unshakable. The world often pressures women to explain themselves, to defend every choice, to justify every boundary. But silence breaks that cycle. Silence says, I do not owe anyone an explanation for honoring myself. Silence says, my energy is too precious to waste on proving what I already know. Silence says strength does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes softly yet reshapes everything it touches. That is why silence is misunderstood. Because it cannot be measured, cannot be argued with, cannot be diminished by noise. When a woman embraces silence, she no longer feels the urgency to chase validation or defend her worth. She understands that the loudest voice in the room is often the weakest, and the strongest presence is the one that does not need to demand attention. Her silence unsettles because it holds power beyond words, and it transforms her into someone who moves differently in the world. Someone who knows that silence, far from being weakness, is the very force that allows her to stand unshaken, to bend the course of her life, and to reshape the world around her with quiet, unmovable strength. Focusing inward creates clarity and dissolves unnecessary battles. A woman who turns her attention to herself begins to see the patterns of distraction that once kept her exhausted. The noise of others' expectations, the weight of endless comparisons, and the pressure to constantly prove her worth start to lose their grip when she chooses to look within. In that inward gaze, she discovers a clarity that no amount of external validation could ever provide. She begins to realize that much of what she thought required her attention was never hers to carry, and many of the battles she fought were only illusions created by the desire to be understood in a world that may never truly listen. When she draws her energy inward, the fog of confusion begins to lift. She notices how often her energy has been scattered across people, situations, and conflicts that drained her spirit. Instead of trying to control the opinions of others, she reclaims control of her own mind, her own emotions, and her own path. This shift brings her into alignment with her true priorities, those that feed her growth rather than distract her from it. Suddenly, the battles that once consumed her seem small, unworthy of the strength she carries. By focusing inward, she learns the difference between what is urgent and what is important, between what needs her voice and what is better left unanswered. Clarity emerges in the stillness of self-reflection. It is like a mirror that shows her not the masks she wore for the world, but the face beneath it, the authentic self she may have buried under layers of roles, responsibilities, and noise. The more she listens to herself, the clearer her path becomes. Instead of scattering her energy across countless directions, she channels it purposefully. This focus turns chaos into order, confusion into certainty, and exhaustion into empowerment. It is not that life suddenly becomes free of challenges, but that she is no longer wasting her strength on struggles that do not belong to her. Unnecessary battles dissolve when she realizes they thrive only on her participation. Arguments lose their fire when she does not fuel them with reaction. Conflict loses its grip when she decides her peace is more valuable than proving her point. By withdrawing her energy from such entanglements, she frees herself from cycles of negativity that once consumed her time and drained her spirit. The act of focusing inward becomes a form of quiet liberation, a way of saying that her energy will no longer be wasted on what does not serve her. As she sharpens her focus on herself, she discovers a newfound sense of freedom. She no longer feels compelled to explain every choice or justify every step. Instead, her clarity speaks for itself. People may notice the change in her presence, calmer, stronger, more grounded, but they cannot quite define it. That is because her strength now comes from within, no longer dependent on the unpredictable tides of outside approval. Her peace is not borrowed, it is built. Her clarity is not given, it is claimed. The more she focuses on herself, the less she fears the judgments of others. Their noise fades into the background, irrelevant to the life she is building. The battles that once seemed impossible to escape dissolve in the light of her clarity, because they were never truly hers to fight. What remains is energy directed with purpose, a mind free from clutter, and a heart aligned with its own rhythm. By turning inward, she not only reclaims herself, but also creates a life where unnecessary battles can no longer survive in the presence of such unwavering clarity. Energy speaks louder than words when a woman centers herself. There is a presence that cannot be faked, a quiet force that radiates when she chooses to pull her energy back from scattered places and anchor it within. Words may persuade for a moment, but energy shapes the atmosphere, influences the unseen, and speaks in a language deeper than sound. When she no longer seeks to prove, to convince, or to endlessly explain, her energy begins to carry a message far stronger than any speech ever could. People feel it without knowing why, sensing her strength in the way she moves, the way she chooses her silences, and the way her very presence commands respect. When a woman is centered, she no longer leaks her energy into places that drain her. She does not fight for attention, nor does she chase validation. Instead, she allows her presence to speak for her, and it does so more powerfully than noise ever could. Those who encounter her cannot help but notice the steadiness in her demeanor, the unshakable calm that comes from within. Her silence becomes magnetic, her focus undeniable, and her boundaries invisible yet unbreakable. It is not about what she says, but about what she radiates. Energy is never hidden, It announces itself without effort. The world has always been more influenced by energy than words. A voice may command temporarily, but energy leaves lasting impressions. A woman who is centered shifts dynamics simply by walking into a room. Her energy makes people rethink their tone, adjust their approach, and measure their words. This happens not because she demands it, but because her centered presence naturally creates balance. Energy is contagious, and when hers is rooted in strength and clarity, it silently influences everything and everyone around her. Centering herself also means she no longer reacts to every provocation. She understands that her energy is her currency, and she spends it carefully. When others expect her to explode, she chooses stillness. When the world anticipates her defense, she offers none. This unsettles those who rely on her reactions, because her silence robs them of control. Her energy, preserved and focused inward, becomes her shield and her sword. It protects her peace while simultaneously dismantling the influence of those who once thrived on her scattered responses. The power of energy over words is also revealed in how people remember her. They may forget what she said, but they will never forget how they felt in her presence. A woman who is centered leaves imprints not by convincing others with arguments, but by embodying her truth so fully that others cannot deny it. Her calm becomes louder than noise, her focus sharper than any criticism, and her self-assurance stronger than any attack. This is why energy speaks louder than words, because it bypasses the mind and goes straight to the soul. To center herself is to align with her own rhythm, to create harmony between her thoughts, emotions, and actions. In that state, everything about her begins to flow effortlessly. She no longer struggles to be heard, for she does not rely on words alone. Her presence becomes enough, her silence a statement, and her energy a language of its own. People may not understand how or why, but they cannot deny the shift she brings into every space she enters. Energy is a truth that cannot be argued with. And when she embodies that truth, it speaks on her behalf, louder and clearer than words ever could. Self-focus is not selfishness, it is alignment with truth and purpose. The world often teaches women that turning inward, prioritizing themselves, or choosing their own path before others is wrong, as if their worth exists only in sacrifice. Yet the truth is the opposite. When a woman decides to focus on herself, she is not abandoning others, but instead restoring balance to her life. She begins to see that pouring endlessly into others, without ever refilling her own spirit, only leads to exhaustion and emptiness. By focusing inward, she replenishes her strength, she nurtures her own growth, and she aligns her life with what is authentic to her soul, rather than what is demanded by the outside world. Self-focus becomes the foundation upon which everything else can thrive. It teaches her to listen to her own needs before responding to the noise around her. It gives her the courage to say no when her energy is depleted, and to say yes only when it truly aligns with her values. This shift is not about neglecting others, but about recognizing that true service, true love, and true giving flow only from a place of wholeness. When she is aligned with herself, her energy overflows naturally, benefiting others without depleting her. The illusion of selfishness comes from misunderstanding. Selfishness is rooted in disregard for others, but self-focus is rooted in self-respect. A woman who takes time to nurture herself, to guard her energy, and to cultivate her own growth does not harm those around her. She strengthens her capacity to contribute meaningfully. Her relationships evolve because they are no longer built on obligation or guilt, but on choice and authenticity. People around her may resist at first because her self-focus disrupts patterns of dependency, but eventually they begin to see that her strength elevates everyone she touches. Alignment with truth and purpose cannot happen when her energy is scattered in directions that do not serve her. She must first silence the noise of expectations, the pull of external validation, and the burden of societal roles. In focusing on herself, she hears the voice within that has always known the way. That voice speaks of dreams she abandoned, boundaries she ignored, and passions she silenced. When she finally listens, she aligns her steps with her own truth, and life begins to feel lighter, clearer, and more meaningful. Purpose reveals itself most clearly in self-focus. It is not found by constantly seeking outside approval, but by going inward, by asking the questions that matter. What fulfills me? What drains me? What am I here to create, to build, to experience? These questions guide her toward choices that resonate deeply with who she is. She begins to realize that every time she dishonors her own truth to please others, she steps away from her purpose. But when she chooses herself, even quietly, she steps closer to the life she was meant to live. Self-focus teaches her to embrace her own pace, to honor her timing, and to trust her journey. It is a form of alignment that creates harmony between her mind, body, and spirit. With this harmony, her decisions no longer feel forced, her relationships no longer feel draining, and her life no longer feels fragmented. Everything begins to flow more naturally because she is no longer resisting herself. She is aligned, centered, and at peace. Others may not always understand this shift, but they cannot deny the glow of someone who has chosen alignment over approval, truth over pretense, and purpose over distraction. Silence and stillness attract respect, balance, and opportunity. In a world where constant noise is mistaken for influence and endless talking for power, silence becomes a rare strength. It creates a contrast so striking that people cannot help but take notice. When a woman chooses stillness over chaos and silence over unnecessary reaction, she sends a message far more powerful than words could carry. Others begin to sense that she is not easily moved, not easily persuaded, and not easily shaken. That quiet strength draws respect because it reflects discipline, restraint, and the kind of self-mastery that few can achieve. Respect often does not come from volume but from presence. Those who are loud may win attention for a moment, but those who are calm command a deeper form of recognition. A woman who embraces silence demonstrates that she does not need to prove herself, because her worth does not depend on convincing others. People start to listen more closely when she finally speaks, because her silence has already built anticipation and weight around her voice. What she says carries impact precisely because she does not scatter words carelessly. Respect follows her because she has learned the rare art of valuing her energy and using it wisely. Silence also becomes a pathway to balance. Constant reaction throws a person into endless emotional battles, but silence creates space to breathe, to think, and to realign. A woman who practices stillness gains perspective, seeing situations more clearly than those lost in noise and argument. She is less likely to be pulled into conflicts that do not serve her and more capable of maintaining her peace in the face of provocation. Her balance is not fragile because it does not depend on external calm. It is created from within. She builds a sanctuary in her own silence, a place where clarity thrives and strength renews itself. This balance influences every area of her life. Relationships become healthier because she no longer wastes energy on endless justifications or unnecessary disputes. Decisions become clearer because she is not reacting out of haste, but responding from a place of stillness. Even her physical well-being benefits, as silence reduces the strain of constant tension and allows her mind and body to rest. Through silence, she discovers that balance is not about controlling the outside world, but about mastering her own inner state. That mastery gives her the freedom to stand firm no matter how unpredictable life becomes. Opportunities, too, are drawn towards silence and stillness. In quietness, she is able to see what others miss. She notices openings, ideas, and possibilities the chaos would have drowned out. Her calm presence attracts people who value stability, wisdom, and discernment, and those are often the very people who can open doors to growth. Opportunities come not only in the form of external chances, but also in the form of inner readiness. Silence prepares her to recognize when the right moment arrives and stillness allows her to step into it with confidence. Instead of chasing desperately, she creates a magnetism that brings opportunities closer to her naturally. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness disguised in simplicity. It is a deliberate choice to hold power inward instead of scattering it outward. A woman who understands this begins to see how her silence shapes the way the world responds to her. She no longer needs to force respect because it arrives uninvited. She no longer struggles to maintain balance because it grows naturally from her stillness. She no longer runs after opportunities because they flow toward the calm and steady energy she embodies. Through silence and stillness, she finds that the very things she once chased begin to come to her, drawn by the strength of her quiet presence. A woman's quiet presence has the power to reorder everything around her. Presence is not about how loudly she speaks or how forcefully she demands to be seen. It is about the energy she carries, the way she walks into a room, and the calmness she radiates when she is at peace with herself. When she is grounded in her own being, her very presence influences the rhythm of her environment. People adjust their tone, situations shift direction, and even the atmosphere feels different simply because she has chosen to remain rooted in silence and strength. The quiet she carries is not emptiness but depth, and depth has a way of rearranging everything it touches. The power of presence lies in what cannot be explained. Words can be debated, actions can be questioned, but presence is undeniable. It speaks to others without needing language. A woman who embraces her quiet presence teaches those around her that respect is not earned by noise, but by self-command. She does not seek to dominate, yet her calm steadiness naturally creates order where there was once chaos. People instinctively pause before speaking to her, they reflect more carefully in her company, and they sense that they cannot treat her carelessly. This is the invisible influence of presence.